Evening to people who are watching this World Council of Churches World Week of Prayer for Justice in Israel Palestine on the YouTube. This is an Irish event. It's being organized by Kairos Ireland, which is part of the global Kairos for Justice. It is focusing on the work for justice and peace. The assembly of the World Council of Churches took place in Karlsruhe earlier this month in Germany. There was a statement on seeking justice and peace for all in the Middle East. This statement says, in Palestine, Israel, there is another wave of forced displacements of Palestinian people from their homes, sometimes on multiple occasions since 1948, as in Sheikh Jarrah, Silwan, the South Hebron Hills, as well as in the rest of Area C. The expanding Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories, especially those encircling East Jerusalem, are illegal under international law and threaten fundamental democratic and political changes to the region. However, they have so undermined any practical prospect of a two-state solution that this path towards a just peace now seems increasingly unviable. So far, so good. Unfortunately, at the assembly of the World Council of Churches, there was little opportunity for Palestinian Christians to speak about their lived reality, and a young Palestinian woman from the World Student Christian Federation was effectively silenced. There was a strong resolution from the South African churches naming Israel as an apartheid regime, but that was resisted. The largest federation of German Protestant churches wanted to avoid the word apartheid altogether, but it is still there in the statement, however, in a muted form. But before I go to people who have just returned from working as ecumenical accompaniers in the West Bank, and before we go to an advocacy officer from Al-Haq, I first of all want to pay tribute to Eamon McMahon. Eamon was the secretary of the Irish Friends of Palestine, the trade union Friends of Palestine. Eamon was buried last week. He was a psychotherapist, and as such, he was particularly concerned about the systematic ill-treatment of Palestinian children in the Israeli military detention system. Through his many visits to the region, Eamon saw the work of the World Council's IAPI program, and he applied to be an ecumenical accompanier. Sadly, ill health prevented him from serving in that way. But I wish to applaud Eamon, who was described as the voice of conscience of the Irish trade union movement on the issue of justice for Palestinians. I'm now going to ask Jan Such-Pickard in the Isle of Mull in Scotland to lead us in an opening prayer. Over to you, Jan.
I'm going to introduce this prayer with a few words. It's a long time since I was an ecumenical accompanier in 2005 and 2010, but images and encounters and conversations and learning from that time are still vivid. So when Pax Christi asked for a reflection for this year's prayer card, one that would be linked to the World Council theme, I thought of the swirling storm clouds that I saw over the village of Yanoun in the mountains above the Jordan Valley, and flocks of doves circling over Jerusalem, a city of bells and tensions, knowing that in this unsettling movement and this time of profound change, God is present. I thought of the hundreds of children and young people in the West Bank and Gaza whose schooling is so disrupted and yet who persist in hope. And I know that God is there. I thought of Israeli and Palestinian organizations monitoring injustice and speaking out courageously, and I know that God is there. I thought of teams of EAs forming and working together, and it's not always easy, but God is there. I thought of steadfast old people I've met embodying sumud. God is there. I thought of young people dabka dancing with the joyful energy of the Holy Spirit, and God is there. God is present, and in these down-to-earth lived realities, we see love in action. And I believe that's how change can come. And so the prayer on the prayer card, which you will see on the screen. God with us. This world, your world, is in a state of constant and creative change. And within it are human institutions, our nations, unstable, dynamic, heading for destruction. Change is in the air. Storm clouds swirl over mountains of the land we call holy. Doves circle over a city of conflict, strangely named peace. Change is in the air. Every morning, children run eagerly to school in spite of all that could hold them back. In their hunger for learning, we see hope. Change is in the air. Women and men of different traditions journey together, witnessing to justice in a way that rekindles our faith. Change is in the air. The old ask hard and honest questions. The young dance with joyful defiance. Minds, homes, hands, hearts opening. Change is in the air. With love in action, change is in the air. God's love moving the world.
Thank you, Jan, for that prayer. We're now going to move on and ask Billy Vaughan, who is in Belfast, to reflect on his second term as an ecumenical accompanier. Earlier this year, Billy was in the Jordan Valley. So I invite you, Billy, to share with us some of your experience there.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, John. I'll just go and share a slideshow I have here. Okay. Hopefully people can see that. If there's any issues, please let me know. So my name is Billy Vaughan. I am, as John said, living in Belfast, but originally from Donegal. And earlier this year, I was in the Jordan Valley as an ecumenical accompanier. Now, later on, I'll be talking about what that entails. But for now, I just describe it as a human rights monitor. So we lived in the city of Jericho, but we were mainly based in the rural areas of the valley. where Palestinians living there are under a lot of threat from the Israeli army and Israeli settlers, and they're living under military occupation. So I was there for 3 months between April and June of this year. Just to give a bit of introduction, you can see Jericho is circled there in yellow, so that's where I was based, and that is in the West Bank. So just to compare it directly to Ireland there, the West Bank would roughly correspond to maybe County Mayo and Galway, or County Antrim and County Down, just to kind of, if you can visualize it a bit easier. So a few facts about the Jordan Valley. It covers almost 30% of the West Bank, and it has a lot of water resources and fertile land. And it was once known as a breadbasket of Palestine, because there are a lot of underground water resources there. So it has a fifth of the land, but it has a third of the water reserves. And so it's a very useful resource for farming, for residential communities, and for things like that. But unfortunately, under Israeli military occupation, a lot of this water is funneled away from Palestinians and towards Israeli settlers who are living there illegally. And again, I'll be going into that in more detail later on. So that map there is just in a little bit more detail, in showing the Jordan Valley area. So we lived in Jericho, but myself and a team of 3 other ecumenical accompaniers were largely based in the area north, the red areas north of Jericho. So those red areas are areas that the Israeli military claim control over. And it's those areas where Palestinian villages, shepherds, farmers encounter a lot of harassment and problems. So one of these Palestinians in particular that we met was called Nasser Zubidat. That's him there standing in front of his farm. He's standing in front of an agricultural pool that had been destroyed by Israeli military forces. So these are photos of the farm before it was destroyed. So Nasser grew tomatoes and cucumbers mainly at his farm, and he needed this agricultural pool basically to supply water in order to irrigate the crops, in order to have income as a farmer. And so he would sell these crops during the year, and that's how he would make his income. On the left there is a photo of the agricultural pool as it was. And on the right is a photo of the agricultural pool as it was being destroyed by the Israeli army. They came out one day with that excavator in the photo, and I think 8 military jeeps, all for this one farmer. And he told us when we were out there that there used to be fish in the pool, and that neighbors in the village used to come out to the pool and try to catch some fish. And if anyone managed to catch any fish, he said they could keep them and bring them home and have them. And unfortunately, he's lost his pool, but also a community resource has been lost. So that's another photo of the destroyed pool. An actual side effect of the pool being destroyed was that the trees on the left were also basically, their roots were severely damaged. As you can see, a lot of the roots are exposed. So not only was the pool destroyed, but a lot of vegetation in the area was destroyed. And you can see the greenhouse to the right where the crops are. So this was the only source of water for the greenhouse, and it was totally destroyed. Some quick facts about Area C. So just to think back to the map of the Jordan Valley I showed you earlier, the areas that the Israeli military claim control over is called Area C. Now, this is 90% of the Jordan Valley, and this is under full Israeli military and civil control. Now, in Nasser's case, the pool was destroyed, and the justification that was given by the military was that he did not have a building permit for it. But the problem is that the vast majority of building permits in Area C are not granted to Palestinians. So these farm buildings, farm facilities, residential buildings, schools, all these facilities, it can nearly be assumed that applications for permits are rejected. And so often Palestinians with no choice go on to build these anyway. And they live under a constant threat of the Israeli military coming in and destroying these structures at any time without any compensation. And so there's a total loss financially for these Palestinians. So this is a photo of the crops after the pool was destroyed. And so the vast majority were completely ruined. And as you can see, it's all dried up. And Nasser said that when the Israelis arrived, they accused him of stealing water from settlers, all of the water, but he actually collected a lot of rainwater from the roof of the greenhouse. And so he was telling us how, he thought the army was even claiming the rainwater that he had collected. So just some quick facts about demolitions in the West Bank. So they reached a 5-year high in 2021, and that's a 6% increase over 2020. So going back to what I was talking about, the water discrimination in the Jordan Valley, Israeli settlers who live in that valley illegally get 18 times more water for agricultural purposes. So while Nasser has to rely on a pool, and he may need to buy water expensively from nearby villages, Israeli settler farmers that may have farms very close to him get water piped in from the official Israeli water company, Makarot, and they get this water very cheaply, and they get lots of that water. They get the vast majority, totally disproportionate to the amount of settler farmers that are there. 46% of the area are closed military zones, 20% are nature reserves, and there are also archaeological areas. And this often results in some very bizarre situations where settlers or soldiers may come out to Palestinians and tell them 1 week that the area that they're farming is an archaeological area, but then they may come out the next week and say that the exact same piece of land is a military zone. So these instruments are used to keep Palestinians from using their own land, but often the system becomes ridiculous because they can't even decide what zone they're going to use. And of course, the ultimate aim of these military zones is to exclude Palestinians and to keep them living in fear of harassment. This is a photo of one of the, it's a firing zone warning sign. There are lots of these around the Jordan Valley, and often they're put up in areas where there is very little or no military activity. And they're used as a pretext, again, as I said, to exclude Palestinian use of the land. So that is Asil. I don't know if you recognize that man. That is Faraz, and he was a field officer for Al-Haq in the Jordan Valley area. So he would have covered a lot of the areas, same areas as us. And he was great to work with. He's doing great work in the Jordan Valley, and unfortunately experiences harassment from Israeli authorities for doing his work. His car was actually confiscated in the time we were out there. But Al-Haq says that The economic development of the Jordan Valley is essential for Palestinian growth and is crucial for the sustainability and viability of an independent Palestinian state. And so, if you have this system of Israeli military occupation, of Israel's illegally sending out settlers to take vast majorities of water resources away from Palestinian farmers, it becomes clear that the viability of a Palestinian state then is in serious threat when you have this area of rich water resources being arbitrarily handed out to a small number of settlers. Unfortunately, the link for this video is not working, so I'm going to go over that, but just to say that the occupation, the military occupation, began in 1967. So the Palestinians in this area have been living under military law, which has brought with it all these problems of demolitions and confiscations for over half a century. Just to go very quickly into the international law around this, the Geneva Convention says that you cannot transfer your own population into a territory you occupy. So Israel cannot transfer its own population into the West Bank. They cannot send these farmers out to take water resources. And any destruction of property, unless absolutely necessary, is illegal. And so the destruction of Nasser's agricultural pool is not justified under international law. And just to go very quickly into the role of an ecumenical accompanier. So we were there to monitor and report human rights violations in the field. We took photos, we spoke to Palestinians, and then we go home, just like I'm doing now, to speak to people at home and to show people what the situation is like out there and what they can do. We also, through our presence, deterred further harassment. Because we're wearing vests, we're very visible international presence, and that sometimes made soldiers or settlers think twice about harassing and things like that. And we also worked with Palestinian and Israeli peace activists, other organizations who were in the area. That is a woman called Zuriya, and she is working with, she didn't work with B'Tselem, she worked with a different organization, but she is an Israeli peace activist, and you can see there that her right arm actually is in a bandage, and that's actually because the week before we met her, it had been broken in an area called Masafer Yatta in the south of the West Bank, where she had been joining protests, and her arm was broken by an Israeli settler in that area. But B'Tselem says about the Jordan Valley, B'Tselem are an Israeli peace organization or human rights organization, and that the overall goal is to tighten Israel's grip over the Jordan Valley and further its de facto annexation of this area. So B'Tselem are saying that Israel's long-term goal is to tighten its grip over the Jordan Valley and the water resources and economic resources that it has. So this is a woman at one of the farms in close to Nasser. It was actually my colleagues that visited her. I wasn't there that day. But one of the quotes they collected was that she said, "We want to live a normal life." And that was one thing we heard again and again. It's not a lofty ask. It's simply to live with the same rights, the same basic human dignity and human rights that everyone else enjoys. And so in terms of taking action, in Ireland in particular, there is a bill going through, well, it has stalled under the current government, but there is a bill that was brought through in the Senate. Basically, what this bill would do is outlaw trade with settlements, such as these farmers, the settler farmers in the Jordan Valley. It would ban trade from Ireland with these farmers, with these settlements. And so one thing you can do is get in touch with your representative and tell them that you support this bill tell them that you want this bill to be passed so that Ireland can send a message internationally that we will not be doing trade with settlements on occupied territory. There's also Eyewitness Blogs is a great resource from EAPPI. It's full of blogs and stories from EAs such as myself and Sophie, just containing interviews such as that with Nasser, so you can find out more about the experiences of Palestinians there. Okay, I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Billy. Okay, thank you very much, Billy, for taking us to the Jordan Valley. We are now going to go to Hebron with Sophie Gregg. Sophie lives in Dublin, but she's currently in London. Sophie has just completed a second term as an EA in the field, and she's been in the very troubled city of Hebron. So, Sophie, we look forward to hearing something of your experience.
Right. Thanks very much for having me. And I hope I won't repeat too much of what Billy said already. So I'll just explain a little bit basically about what's been happening this summer in Hebron. And I'll just share the screen with you now. Okay, so my name is Sophie Gregg, and I'm just going to be presenting about the last couple of months in Hebron. So I went back for a second term from June to September 2022. Hebron is a city in the West Bank. It's about 2,500,000 people live there, so it's roughly about the population of Cork. That also makes it the biggest city in the West Bank. And what makes it unusual for a Palestinian city, though, is that it's the only Palestinian city where less than 1,000 settlers have taken over the city center, in many cases restricting Palestinian access to the main roads, to the ability to travel from north to south, or to use the area as a marketplace or a commercial hub as it used to be. So to protect less than 1,000 settlers, or roughly about 700, a large army force has kind of moved into the area, and people in the area are living under extreme military occupation in a more concentrated form than in other parts of the West Bank. So what does that look like on the ground, and how does it affect Hebronites? And why are EAs needed, and what sort of incidents have we been reporting on? I'll explain this to you in the next couple of slides. So the image here on this slide is a pretty common picture. We just kind of happened across this walking down the street in Hebron over the summer. And it's something that you would see on a very daily basis. It's basically a routine. And what you see there is a soldier guarding a teenager, and he's got his hands tied behind his back and he's blindfolded. During the summer, the brigade of soldiers that were present in Hebron changed. And each brigade has its own set of tactics. Previously, the brigade, when we arrived, for example, was quite happy to use tear gas quite easily. So we noticed that there was a decrease in the amount of tear gas that was being used against people. However, the statistics that we've sent to UNOCHA since the beginning of August in particular have shown that since the brigade changed, there's been a 50% increase in arrests of children just in the city of Hebron alone. They're often arrested in groups, usually in groups of 4, sometimes 5 or 6. They're not typically given a reason, and the DCO, that's the District Coordination Office, which would receive the, basically if your child was arrested, you would contact this office of the army, which is responsible for civilian details, and ask them, where has your child been taken to? So in many cases, this DCO office hasn't been receiving details of arrested children, which seems to indicate that they're actually not being taken to police stations. They might just be being held on streets or taken from one location to another and then released later in the day or the day after. We also observed them singling out the youngest child in a group often. For example, like if there were a group of, let's say, 13-year-olds and one of them appears to be a bit smaller than the others, it's usually the smaller child that would get taken first. Also children with injuries. I can think of 2 examples right now. One was a child of about 16 on crutches with a cast on his leg. And soldiers came up to him basically and told him that he better be careful or they would break his other leg. To which he responded that they actually didn't break any of his legs and he got injured in a different way. Another occasion, they did the same thing to another child with a broken leg, and it turned out that they actually had shot the child in the leg, and they were just sort of asking how his leg was doing. Other things we've noticed across, especially July and August this summer, included settlers demolishing Palestinian homes, both inside Hebron itself and in surrounding villages without legal orders, but with Israeli army accompaniment. So that's a concerning new development. And also we noticed increasingly tense weekly settler tours, and I'll get into what that is in a minute. This was often a scene where we would see children being arrested too. The next slide, I think, this is a picture of a settler tour that I just mentioned. Basically what a settler tour is when a group of Israeli settlers who normally live in a settlement inside of a restricted part of Hebron that most Palestinians can't enter. Every Saturday they have like a weekly kind of tour led by a tour guide who takes them around Palestinian areas and tells them about the Jewish history of the city, and stops at various people's shops and houses and tells them, you know, this was a Jewish house in the past and it's going to be one again, or something like that. And they usually come, it can be a group of anywhere between 20 people and 100 people. Usually there are about 1 soldier or 2 soldiers for every settler. And this is typically what it looks like. You see here the shopkeeper just kind of, you know, sitting there observing as settlers walk through the area. And on this particular day, they stole some of his merchandise and knocked others to the ground. And he mentioned to one of the soldiers here that had happened. The soldier saw it happen, but he complained basically to the soldier. And the soldier said, I look into it, even though we were all there and we all saw who did it and we saw what happened. And this particular occasion, when I took this photo as well, was actually the occasion of an arrest of a child. And I'll show you now a picture of that. So this is Jamil. And he's just around the corner. You can't tell from the images, but he's just around the corner from this picture here. And what he's doing here is sitting on a step, watching as the settlers are about to arrive through a gate. So on this particular occasion, a soldier saw him there, walked around and arrested him. He wasn't given a reason. EAs who witnessed the arrest and asked for a reason weren't given one either. And he was later told it was because his dog barked at the arriving settlers and they didn't like it. I'll just see if I can show you now a sample of what the arrest looked like. We have a small part of it on video, but we don't have him being carried away. You can see him in the corner here, and this is a gate that leads to a restricted part of Hebron that only soldiers and Israeli settlers are allowed into.
Sorry, Sophie, we're not seeing the video.
Oh, sorry.
We're meant to see it.
Can you? Is it just too small, or you can't see it at all?
Not at all.
Okay. Okay, I'll just describe it to you. So basically it is an EA basically asking for a reason, a legal pretext, like, is there any law that you're arresting him under? Have you suspected him of anything? And he's just basically being told that the EA should go away. In that occasion, I think EA's protective presence was actually effective because they didn't in the end take him. He was handed over to a commander, and the commander, when asked for a legal reason, just kind of let him go, and then explained later that it was because his dog barked at the arriving settlers. And so we don't have a video of his actual arrest itself, but I can hopefully show you another video, which took place on August 9th. which we weren't as close as this, but we did see it from a distance. And this is pretty much what arrests of children have looked like when we have seen them in Hebron. Can you see this video?
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
مصطفى اسمه القصير باين مصطفى القصير خامس رجل خامس يا عمي خامس على
Sophie, are you talking?
No, I'm not. I'll just show you the screen again, sorry. Okay, so that the arrest I just showed you there took place on August 9th, which was a day, and the checkpoint that the child was taken into is called checkpoint 56, which is one of the major checkpoints where confrontations tend to break out in Hebron. On August 9th, we saw very serious confrontations break out. And
Sophie, I think that might
last for a couple of days.
Video.
This was because the Israeli army raided the old city of Nablus and killed 3 people. As the day kind of passed on, they also shot a child in the neck in Hebron, killing him as well, which we also saw from a distance. And as you can imagine, these things are completely against international law. The main sort of article of international law that all of this breaks is the Fourth Geneva Convention, which states that the occupying power shall not transfer its population into the territory that it occupies. So part of this means that the occupant doesn't acquire sovereignty over the territory and can't seize private property, which it has been doing. So it's only temporary as well. Like occupying something for 50 years or 70 years doesn't mean that you eventually own it. The occupying power must respect the rule of law and laws which are already in place in the occupied territory. And it also must ensure sufficient hygiene, public health, or the right to life, etc., etc. So what can we do about it? I think Billy was saying the same as well. One thing we can do is speak to TDs and MEPs about passing the Occupied Territories Bill. Another thing we can do is sign the European Citizens Initiative to ban trade with illegal settlements. You can visit Palestine yourself, or you can invite an EA to speak to a group you're a part of, or you can donate to the program. Okay, so thanks very much for listening to me.
Thanks very much, Sophie, for sharing that with us. We need to, there we are. Thanks very much, Sophie, for sharing that with us. Very disturbing to see 4 soldiers carting away a child who has been wounded in the leg, like a sack of potatoes, with the child screaming in agony. Terrible. We are now going to hear from Asil Al-Baji, who is an advocacy officer with the Palestinian human rights organization Al-Haq. Al-Haq, together with 6 other NGOs, has been declared by the Israeli army to be a terrorist organization. Their offices have been raided and they continue to work, but under the threat that people monitoring human rights and publishing the results of their investigations may be imprisoned. It takes a great deal of courage to be a human rights monitor in the occupied territory. So, Asil, we look forward to hearing from you about being a human rights organization under military occupation. So over to you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I actually don't have very well organized PowerPoint presentation, so I'll try not to be boring. But I will talk about basically the escalated attacks against civil society organizations since last year. But I will also try to contextualize these attacks because they didn't start with the designation of last October. So just briefly on sequence of events of what happened through the past year, which is the escalated attacks against 6 leading human rights organizations in Palestine. It started with in October when the Israeli Minister of Defense designated 6 organizations as terrorist organizations under Israel's domestic law called Anti-Terrorism Law of 2016. And for those who don't know the 6 organizations, I'm representing one of them, Al-Haq, which is the first human rights organization actually in the Middle East, not only in Palestine. The other 5 organizations are Al-Damir, Prisoner Support and Human Rights Association, Visan Center for Research and Development, Defense for Children International, VCI, the Union of Agricultural Work Committees, and the Union of Palestinian Women's Committees. Now, after this designation in October, this move was followed by issuing military orders by the military commander saying that the 6 organizations are unlawful associations, which basically gives the same effect of the designation into the occupied Palestinian territory. And just recently, last month, I think tomorrow would mark 1 month since the Israeli occupying forces raided our offices last month, and it damaged and confiscated properties in the organizations. It raided in all of them based in the occupied Ramallah city. And it also sealed the doors of the offices and left military orders at each organization saying that our operation is illegal under the military order and that we should be closed and we should not continue our work. And after that, following this raid, also 3 of the general directors of the 6 organizations received threatening calls from Israeli occupying authorities, threatening calls with imprisonment, saying that if you continue your work as civil society organizations, you will pay a personal price and you will be imprisoned. So these are just in a nutshell the sequence of events that have been unfolding since last October. But it's really important to, first of all, say, why is Israel attacking the 6 organization? Is this happening in vacuum, or is this part of an institutionalized effort to suppress basically any voice criticizing Israel's violations and crimes against the Palestinian people, and also to talk about the implications of these attacks against civil society and repercussions on the staff of the 6 organizations. So basically, the law that designated the 6 organizations, the anti-terror law of 2016, it has provisions which says that our work should be basically outlawed. It has repercussions on the staff of the organizations with imprisonments varying from 5 years of imprisonment to 25 years, depending on the seniority of the position of the person. So we are under threat of being imprisoned. Also, the assets and the money and the properties of the organizations is under threat of being confiscated as well. Important to note is that in this designation and in this law, Israel is not only attacking the 6 organizations, it is also attacking partners and supporters and like international partners who are basically funding these organizations, because there's provisions in the law that says also actions that benefit the organizations are liable to basically criminalization. And this is, in our analysis, we see that Israel has been engaging in this attack against civil society organizations, trying to dry our resources and stop our funding, and it has failed for decades. And so with this designation from last October, it is also trying to now intimidate the partners, international partners and donors, in order for the work of the 6 organizations to be stopped by from outside. But fortunately, this has not happened, since we have received ongoing funding and ongoing support, and mounting actually support, specifically from the global human rights movement. Now, in terms of why is Israel attacking these 6 organizations, it should be noted that it is an attack on 6 organizations, but if this continues, if this is allowed to continue to happen, then Israel is basically attacking the whole Palestinian civil society and human rights organizations. And it is basically, the main reason is because of the main work we do, the core work we do. And for these 6 organizations, for example, the main work we do is documenting and monitoring human rights violations on the ground. Since in the case of Al-Haq, we have been doing that for 43 years now, documenting violations on the ground. Other organizations' mandate is are mandated with specific thematic areas. So Al-Damir, for example, work on advocating for the rights of Palestinian political prisoners. We also work, the 6 organizations, some of us work on issues around accountability, including with cooperating and supporting evidence to the International Criminal Court. We also, some of the organizations, DCI, work exclusively with children. So they document human rights violations against Palestinian children, and also try to advocate for Palestinian under military detention system. Some of the organizations as well, of the 6 organizations, try to empower communities in Palestine who are disproportionately affected by the military occupation, including farmers and workers. So in a nutshell, this is the type of the work we do, but more broadly, our mission as civil society and as the 6 organization is to basically realize the right of the self-determination of the Palestinian people as a collective people, and counter the impunity that Israel has been enjoying for over 70 years now, by seeking accountability, by exposing violations, by doing advocacy internationally. And so why is Israel attacking the 6? Because it doesn't want to be challenged. It wants to evade accountability. It wants to expand the settler, colonial, and apartheid regime with total impunity, and without being even criticized, not even held accountable. And so attacking Palestinian civil society and eventually isolating them from the global human rights movement is a tactic whereby Israel doesn't want to be basically challenged. Also important to note that this is also not only against the attacks and threats and intimidations against civil society, take part of a broader regime against any any kind of voice which tries to oppose or resist Israeli violations is also subjected to different tactics of suppression and silencing. For example, if you protest as a Palestinian, even if you're a peaceful protest, you are also subjected to policies such as excessive use of force. If you voice your demands, you would be subjected to arbitrary detention or torture and ill treatment in these prisons. So there are a wide range of policies that Israel uses to basically suppress any effort trying to challenge its regime. And so we're talking about excessive use of force, arbitrary detention, collective punishment, and the smearing campaigns of civil society organization is just another tool whereby Israel is basically suppressing Palestinian resistance. Now, in terms of the repercussions that has affected the work of the 6 organizations since the designation since last October, I think one of the main, it could be one of the main ones, that Israel wants to basically shut down our work. And with this designation, it has placed us under imminent threat of being arrested, and we're kind of being on this defensive mode. So Israel is trying also to distract us from the core work we do. So instead of us focusing on the daily work we do, which is documentation of human rights violation and the list of activities I just said, we are being forced into this defensive mode against this attack, which Israel has not managed to do because we're continuing to operate since October. But it's really important to not undermine this attack. Another thing that has happened, or repercussions since the designation, is that there has been some arrests of staff from the 6 organizations, and this include a lawyer from the Damir organization. He holds a French nationality as well, and he is a Jerusalemite. He was arrested under administrative detention in March this year. And for those who don't know what administrative detention is, it's basically arresting Palestinians with no charge or trial based on secret evidence. So there's no way to challenge this arrest, and it can be renewed indefinitely. So Salah Hammouri was arrested in March this year, and his detention was renewed two times since then. He is still in Israeli detention as we're speaking. His case is also very alarming because he holds a Jerusalemite permanent residency status, which is what the legal status of Jerusalem, the ID that Jerusalemites have. And actually, he had his residency revoked in October last year, and Israel cites a very illegal but also problematic criteria, which is saying that we can basically revoke residencies of people based on breach of allegiance. And of course, this is illegal because Palestinians do not have to be loyal to their occupying under international law, but it's a systematic policy whereby Israel wants to empty Jerusalem from its residents. So it's a forcible transfer, basically, policy. And so Salah's case here exemplifies persecution against human rights defenders, as he was subjected to administrative detention, and he had his residency revoked. And he is also one of the people that were subjected to spyware surveillance. In November last year, also 3 of the staff members of the 6 organizations were hacked with the Pegasus software of the Israeli NSO group. And this is also one of the repercussions that has happened since the designation. I'm just stating the negative repercussions, and I could go on and on, but also there has been, unfortunately, suspensions of funding from some of the organizations. On the other hand, we have received mounting and a lot of support from our partners and donors, and condemning the designation as a political, basically, move from the Israeli government to shut down Palestinian civil society as an illegal act as well. From UN experts have said that this is an illegal measure towards eliminating Palestinian civil society. States have also been condemning the attack against civil society. Now, unfortunately, all the support has not been complemented with concrete actions to pressure Israel to basically rescind the designation and the military orders. Because since the attack, we have called the civil society organizations on states specifically to pressure Israel to rescind the designation and to rescind the military orders, because if the military order and the designation remains, we will remain to be under threat. And so this is the main demand of our campaign, Stand with the Six. And if I want to be maybe more positive on how have we been operating since the designation, I would say that just last month, since the raid of our offices, because I told you that last month the Israeli forces raided the 7 organizations in the West Bank and Ramallah. And so, of course, we have not stopped working. We are operating as usual, and just some of the few examples that Al-Haq alone has been doing for the last month, which is the ongoing core work, is that we have, of course, continuing our documentation on the ground. We're continuing doing orientation courses and trainings. We're actually working on 2 huge reports coming up, one on Israeli apartheid, and this is, of course, as part of the ongoing campaign against Israeli apartheid regime, as the Palestinian civil society is leading. We also have an upcoming report on a case study of Beta. Beta is a Palestinian village in Nablus, and it actually exemplifies the systematic suppression against Palestinians who engage in popular resistance against settlement expansion. So, for example, this village, they had part of their land, a colonial outpost by settlers was established on their land last May, not last May, May 2021. And since then, the villagers have been engaging in peaceful protest against the colonial outpost. And of course, the Israeli occupying forces were typical in the excessive use of force against the protesters. And in just 1 year, they killed 10 protesters from the village and injured thousands, leaving many with permanent disabilities. So this is one of the case studies we have an upcoming report on. We're also engaging currently with the Human Rights Council, with the Human Rights Council, also with the United Nations General Assembly session currently ongoing. We have also submitted a report just recently with Justice Advocates on to the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, calling for Canadian company to be listed on the UN database of business operating in legal settlements. We have also submitted a joint parallel report this month to the UN Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. I don't want to take too long, but just saying that we are operating as usual, and we will continue to do that. And we're also engaging in the Stand with the Six campaign, trying to actually concentrate our advocacy internationally to ensure that third states or the international community do take concrete actions to pressure Israel to rescind the designation. And on a positive note, we, for example, launched a call for artists just yesterday. It's basically just to try to turn symbols of oppression into something more creative and more manifestation of resilience and steadfastness of the Palestinian people. So we called for artists to basically turn the metal sheet that the Israeli occupying forces has used to shut our doors, Al-Haq and the other 6 organizations, and try to think into creative ways to basically turn this oppressive symbol into something more that represents Palestinian resilience and resistance. So this is just a positive note to basically end with. And in terms of concrete actions, I think my colleagues covered many ideas that could be done specifically in Europe, that includes supporting the signing the EU citizenship initiative to stop trade with illegal settlements. And also one of the great recommendations is basically send to your policymaker to basically push on the Irish Territories Bill to basically stop and ban trade with the illegal settlements. I think more broadly, what we need now as Palestinian people as a whole and as the Palestinian civil society is concrete actions manifested in countermeasures and sanctions. And this could include imposing or stopping trade with illegal, with arms trade with Israel. That is systematically being used to kill Palestinians and suppress Palestinians. So also what could be done by citizens and civil society around the globe is to basically pressure governments to impose sanctions on Israel. I talked about stopping trade with the illegal settlement enterprise. And also one important recommendation from our side as Palestinian civil society is to basically recognize the situation as it is, because we're not talking about violations that are happening in a vacuum or are not connected together. We're talking about a settler colonial regime that is trying to, from more than 70 years, to basically eliminate the Palestinian presence and replace them with settler population. And we're talking about an apartheid regime that is systematically oppressing and discriminating against the Palestinian people as a whole. So we're not only talking about the occupied Palestinian territory that is the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip. We're talking about a systematic regime suppressing and dominating Palestinian people, including citizens of the state of Israel, and including Palestinian refugees in Palestine and in exile. So basically, the first step, I think, would be is recognizing the situation as it is in order to address it and arrive to a solution of decolonization and justice to the Palestinian people. Thank you.
Asil, thank you very much for outlining the pressures that you are under as a human rights NGO. We can only salute the decision to carry on working when there are actual threats being made against senior staff members, and you have even described the arrest and detention under the iniquitous administrative detention system of one of your
John, sorry to
lawyers.
interrupt, but you might want to start your video.
Oh, right. Sorry, I thought I had done so, Eamon. Yeah, I was just saying, Asil, we salute and commend you for continuing the human rights work in spite of the threats, in spite of the pressure, in spite of administrative detention. You have mentioned a number of things that you expect and look for from us in Europe. One is the European Citizens Initiative, and that applies to EU citizens who can join the petition. We require 1 million signatures to oblige the European Commission to look at the issue of trade between EU countries and the illegal settlements. We're working on that in Ireland. We haven't achieved our quota, but we hope we will do that. You mentioned the Occupied Territories Bill in Ireland. That's currently asleep, as it were, but it can be wakened up, though probably realistically that will require a change of government in 2 years' time at the next election. You mentioned lobbying, and we can continue to hold before politicians the situation that you are in. I mean, I write letters to my TDs, to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, and I'm sure other people do that as well. But we have to be very humble when we hear your reality of constant threat, but still of carrying on, of not giving up. I want to conclude this meeting with prayers of intercession. The theme for the World Council's Week of Prayer for Justice in Israel Palestine is faith, hope, and love in action towards justice in Palestine and Israel. With that theme of faith, hope, and love, I will now lead a short time of intercession. Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness as an ever-flowing stream. We recall and remember the pain of Palestinians and Israelis who carry deep wounds of Holocaust and Nakba. May they find comfort and healing in the discovery of common humanity. We pray for the peace of Jerusalem, a new Jerusalem where Christians, Muslims, and Jews will live in mutual equality and respect, when each person will sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one will make them afraid. We long for an end to demolitions and detentions and child arrests, evictions, and violence. Break down the walls of separation and unite us in a single body. We give thanks for the steadfastness of people who refuse to give up hope despite overwhelming odds, who rebuild demolished homes time after time, who refuse to be crushed. We pray for soldiers ordered to enforce unjust occupation, that their eyes might be opened, their hearts changed. We give thanks for the conscientious objectors, refuseniks, who refuse to be part of an unjust system of military oppression. We uphold human rights advocates in Palestine and Israel, especially NGOs unjustly accused of supporting terrorism. Strengthen their resolve to witness to truth and to speak out for those whose voice is silenced. We pray for settlers living on stolen land. May they cease to do evil, learn to do good, seek justice, and correct oppression. We pray for political leaders in Europe and America, that they will end complicity with the injustice of occupation and uphold the values of fairness and equal rights that they profess to believe in. We pray for churches, those that speak truth to power and those that remain silent. Awaken conscience, strengthen prophetic voices, show us the way that leads to life. Finally, we pray for ourselves, that we may have faith that justice is possible, hope that peace will come, and love to carry on acting to make real a vision of a world where no one is excluded from the feast of life. Amen. I just want to close by thanking Jan in the Isle of Mull for our opening prayer, for Billy in Belfast, Sophie in London, and especially for Asil in Ramallah. Thank you for sharing with us, and thank you for everyone who has been taking part by watching this YouTube presentation. We conclude there, but I will be in touch with people on our mailing list, underlining the actions that we can take. Good night, and